welcome to the Reluctant Agilist. I'm Dave Pryor. Today I'm here with Brett Harned and Greg Storey from Same Team Partners, and we're going to talk all about creating a more humane workspace. So guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having
For
us.
having us.
Thanks for being back, I guess I should say, because you've been here before. So I want to jump into the products in a few minutes and kind of the overall mission. But before we do that, before we talk about how you came about creating Same Team Partners, can we talk a little bit about where you guys, like what your background is, where you're from, when you got bit by the radioactive spider, all that. So Greg, maybe we start with you.
My background is rooted in design.
Okay.
So I've been a designer as long as I can know. Got into the internet when it was kind of a brand new thing and stayed there. And in that same time, early days of the web, I've primarily been in leadership roles of one shape, one size or another. And my career has taken me from starting my own studio and growing that into a nice little healthy business, then partnering with my friends, but also business adversaries in a shop called Happy Cog, where I met Brett. And then from there have worked at large IBM, hundreds of thousands of people, kind of back down to smaller companies. And as you say, like the radioactive spider, Brett and I were chatting and said, "Hey, we like doing this kind of work. Let's go back into business."
Okay. All right. And Brett?
Yeah. So I guess the PM folks generally know me as the project management or digital project management guy. So, part of my story is starting the Digital PM Summit conference. Greg was there for that ride. Greg enabled a lot of that. Greg was my partner in designing a lot of the collateral for the event, working on marketing, and then really he was one of the very few people who actually spent time to make sure that the event went well, like on the day of. He was there. Like we work really well together. We also kind of work together in that agency to bridge the gap between two kind of co-located offices between Austin and Philadelphia.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time in Austin with Greg, and we ended up leaving that company at the same time. And around that time, I wrote my book. He wrote the forward to the book. We podcasted on Sprints and Milestones together. You came on to that.
Yep.
So we've just always worked together. Like we work well together. We collaborate well together. I think our communication is our strongest point. Like we've obviously hit bumps in the road like any other team, but we talk through it, we move on, and we get stuff done. So yeah, we decided to start Same Team Partners about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a journey.
I don't think you can plug the book without telling the name of the book, so you should probably throw that down too.
Well, I guess I wasn't plugging it. I'm bad at that. Project Management for Humans. You should buy it. Ding, ding, ding.
All right. And that's an important part of the story. So my understanding of Same Team Partners and the mission that you guys are on is one that I think will resonate with the folks listening to this, because it's becoming a larger part of the conversation in the agile space and in the traditional space, in that there are a lot of people who have decided to focus their time and energy on creating more humane workspaces for people, where it's less of like Animal Farm, like a slog, which I think is an easy trap to fall into in a digital agency. And I would imagine at a bigger company like IBM as well. So can you talk a little bit about like what you've seen that led you to feel like this is the mission that you needed to be on?
Yeah, I think there was a short gap where Brett and I had just kind of gone our ways. The band kind of broke up a little bit, and when we came back and started to share stories of the work that we had both done and the problems that we'd seen out in the world, it was still the same kind of classic problems that we saw when we worked together at Happy Cog, one, so many problems are rooted in some form of bad communication.
Okay.
And, just people not practicing fundamentals of communication. By people, I mean mostly leaders, especially big company leadership, even small company leadership, just bad communication. And Then, of course, poor communication has an impact, a negative impact on your collaboration or the quality of it. And if you can't get those two things right, then you don't have a good culture. And so it was this, we kind of saw that we were aligned on there are these fundamentals of these three areas that if you're not practicing those, and we're talking about, old school stuff, just, people get promoted into leadership positions. They typically don't receive any kind of training, any kind of learning development. There might be a learning management system that they've got access to, right? But there's kind of a lost art of onboarding leaders, training them, mentoring them, to make sure that these fundamental practices are happening before they get into things like growth hacking and velocity and whatever, name all the crap that we've been through in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that's where that's where we kind of come from. That's where we both see a need for human-centered practices, at these core levels.
So
I
what
also
is
just want to add too that we've been in situations with very high functioning teams with a positive culture,
Mm-hmm.
and we've seen it go south,
oh
right? We've also been as consultants, even as employees, in organizations where teams are not functioning well, and it's a result of misalignment.
okay.
Yep.
Misalignment in just like baseline, how are we supposed to do these things? Like not agreeing on standard practices and procedures. I'm not even talking about process. I'm talking about the things that even enable a process to work to begin with.
Okay.
So I think with Team Angle, we are presenting a solution to help teams get aligned, become closer, become higher performing teams by having conversations that a lot of teams or leaders just don't even think to have.
Because people are like batteries, and we should just be able to swap them out and put new ones in when they get worn out.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're all replaceable.
So
But
go
I
ahead.
was going to say, just to add to Brett, what you said is not only do they not think about how to do these things, we've also run into two leaders who they'd like to, they're curious, they're interested, but it also, for whatever reason, is a source of anxiety for them,
Mm.
right? Because they don't have, uh, because they lack knowledge and experience, they will often put these things off, the conversations, the collaboration that leads to those breakthroughs, which honestly don't cost a lot of money. This is what kind of scratches my head. And I know Brett too is like, this is simple stuff. This is low hanging fruit. But because it's not been put in practice or they haven't seen it, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know that I don't know. And I'm scared of it type of thing.
Yeah. Well, it theoretically puts their output and them at risk. But you described a few minutes ago, Brett. You talked about you've seen this work well, how it goes good and then turns south. So I know what it looks like when it goes south. What does it look like when it's not south, when it's going well? Because that seems unusual to me. How do you know if it's healthy?
Uh, a few things. I mean, it's first of all, it's just like an overall vibe with the culture and the team, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are people doing? Are they happy? Are people interacting openly and freely? Like, do people in check ins, how are people doing personally? How are they feeling about the work and the
Okay.
collaboration? Um, there was a stage when we were working at Happy Cog where our leadership team decided to break our larger team up into smaller teams. And those kind of like account teams were assigned all projects together. So you were assigned to work as a unit. And it was up to you to get the work done. We gave them the agency to figure out how they wanted to deliver, how they wanted to collaborate. They came up with their own team names. There were a lot of positive results that came out of that exercise. So that was one of the ways I've seen it. What about you, Greg?
I, I think it's the the absence of stress.
Mm.
Oh,
so even like to what Brett referenced, um, we had at Happy Cog we had two studios. There was the one I was in Austin, and then there was one in Philadelphia, and we would meet together on a regular basis as a entire company. But even on our smaller teams prior to this kind of reinvention of our org structure, you could sense stress. You could see it. You could feel it in people. Our our conversations, typically went right to work, or something about what people were having a tough time about. But it sounds weird. But even when we were doing this 10 years ago, through Zoom and other awful web chat things. Skype, that's the one I was thinking of. Skype, remember?
yeah, the good old days.
Man, the stress, the tension, even some anxiety was palpable through the screen. And when we made those changes to the org structure, that disappeared immediately.
So when you say stress and tension, like I think about tension a lot in a work environment because you need a certain amount of friction, you need a certain amount of tension. That's part of being creative. You need something to like rub against to make the new thing. But
Right.
there's positive stress and stress that is more destructive.
Yeah,
So
positive tension enforces or supports.
okay.
Negative tension starts to degrade, break things down.
So I'm
Right.
curious
So,
about one thing about this. So Texas and Philly, as somebody who tried to move from Manhattan to Plano, I would say that one, no one should ever do that. But two, there is a way of interacting that is very East Coast. Like you said, it's all about the work. And when I interact with people, I go straight to the work as a sign of respect because you're busy
mm,
and I'm busy and I don't want to mess with you. You got stuff to do. But in Texas, it wasn't like that at all. If I didn't take that time up front to check in with people and see how they were as like human beings, I wasn't going to get anywhere. Was that part of it for you guys?
I think so. Although I don't know that maybe we got lucky, and Brett, you might have your take on this, but anytime we got together as a whole, like we we were like a high functioning culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like people weren't necessarily best friends, but there was admiration and respect amongst everyone, for everyone,
Okay.
right? Like you're talking about Formula One team, type of operation here, just in terms of how people just got along.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. I think the culture was a positive one, and it was open and communicative in that
mhm.
the whole company, the whole team would meet daily for a stand up. So everyone had a sense of ownership,
Okay.
and you were seen. You were very seen every
Yeah,
day as an individual. So I think that contributed to a positive culture where, of course, there was stress. It's an agency,
Yeah.
but it's
yeah,
not stress. It's stress related to the crap that clients are presenting. It's not stress related to internal strife or not knowing how to do a thing or disagreeing. Of course, there were disagreements here and there, but again, that's that positive tension.
Okay.
I
yeah,
think for us, it was a world where the culture that was very intentionally built was working.
yeah.
Okay.
The thing you talk about, Dave, is kind of like this, like regional differences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that to me, like what you just shared, that I'm a New Yorker, we're busy, let's get to work. And then you get to Texas where, and I know that culture very well. You're talking about kids and you're talking about football.
Football and
Um,
church and guns and all that
yeah,
stuff.
you're
Yeah.
you're talking about that stuff a good long 10 minutes before you ever bring up, all right, why are we here? What kind of work
Yeah.
we need to get done, right? And that to me is, I mentioned right before we hit the record button, that developing empathy, but that also goes both ways, right? So in that situation, And I've seen that before, is people move with best intentions, positive intentions for the most part. You have to assume that. But then you get in these situations where there's a lot that goes unsaid, right?
Hmm.
In that situation, you were getting straight to work because of respect, not because you didn't care about that person,
Right.
right? But without knowing, like, hey, it's important to them that there's this preamble type of thing, and but also vice versa, that they understand, hey, Dave has spent time in workplaces where you didn't do that, not for a negative reason, but for a positive reason, right? And that's where this is what we try to teach at Same Team, and very much a part of what Brett and I believe in, is that human-centered interaction that comes with things like, welcome Dave to Texas and to the new team. Like, let's
Sure.
let's put peanut butter on our noses and sniff each other for a little bit, type of thing. Like, in other words, how do we what can we do to get to know one another, to a certain degree that enables us to interact more positively, and
Okay.
yeah, and not just positively. This isn't about feel good. This is developing can we get to a shared language? How can we get to trust one another sooner than later?
Right.
Right. These elements of human interaction that enable incredible autonomy, agency, getting things done sooner, quicker, faster.
Okay.
There's all these benefits that come to employing human-centered practices in your communication, collaboration, and culture.
And in a way that is going to not make people feel like it's a threat to the deliverables.
The exact opposite.
Mm.
And I've so uh, we talked about where we've seen this, teams just fall apart, just destroy each other. I inherited a team while working at a very, very large financial institution. And, my team was interacting with another team, and I had a relationship. I had a need to have a relationship with that other team's leader. And when I came on board, I had people pulling me aside before I even knew like really where I was, saying, that other team, those guys, they suck, they're mean, they don't like anything we do, they complain about us all the time. And then
Yeah.
I got pulled in from the leader of the other team saying, your people are slow, they keep throwing away our work. There's just this, there was palpable tension everywhere, stress everywhere. And I couldn't understand it because relatively speaking, to everybody that participated in this kind of uh, turf war, I was the last person hired. Right, like these people have been working together for months,
Yeah.
and so when I started to dig in deeper, I found out that when they went to go arrange their working relationship, they, they made all kinds of assumptions on who was doing what, who was responsible for what, and even the work that each other was doing. And through a couple exercises, some which we have workshops, patterned around this, is we got the teams together and said, map out your process from going from idea to deployed or delivered thing. And sure enough, man, both teams, when they did that, it was like, well, now I know what the problem is. You guys are overlapped like 60% here. And you're it's like we're being incredibly wasteful. We're duplicating like an insane amount of work, and we're overlapping in terms of like you're doing work that you shouldn't be, because the other team is better suited for it. That's why they were hired, and vice versa, right? It wasn't just a
Okay.
one-sided thing.
Yeah.
Once we knew that, and once they saw what was happening, and then I gave them a direction, I said, you have 30 days to add details to what we learned here today, and then I want you to co-create a new path forward.
Okay.
They did that. They reduced time to market by 65%.
Wow.
Right? They figured out, they did RACI, They figured out who's responsible in action, or sorry, who's responsible and accountable for everything. So now they weren't squabbling on that's my job, no, that's my job,
Right.
right? And again, the tension, the stress went away completely,
Because you created
right?
safety for them in that they understood what was their sort of realm to worry about and what they could count
Not
on other
worry.
people to worry about. Well,
What was their realm
focus
to
on.
where they could focus, but then they also had an idea of like, here's where we have shared responsibility. Here's we have, direct accountability. Here's what I know you're on the hook for and what I need to be on the hook for. Right? They had a shared language. They had a shared understanding. They understood what each other's goals, how they were being measured as individuals, as individual teams, and as a combined team. Right? And so
Okay.
I use the word empathy. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot of layers. But once you develop, get an idea of what other people are going through, not just like, hey, how's your day? It's like, hey, how are you going to make sure that you still have a job in 12 months?
Okay.
Right? Things like this. When we understand each other at that level and then build from there, you're going. This is not a detriment. These practices will not hold your projects back. These practices will enable your teams to function on a level I guarantee you haven't seen.
Well, and if you have multiple teams creating that value stream and identifying the points where there's collaboration or issues or whatever, and they get to design the solution, they're more bought into it because it's their answer.
There's no buy-in. They created it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about for, let's say you guys go in, I want to talk kind of segue into team angle, but you guys go into an org and you start to work with the teams on this stuff. I just ran into a situation where we were doing that and ignoring the manager. And the longer we ignored the manager, the more unsafe they felt because they knew somebody was going to ask them what was going on and they didn't have the answer. They had no visibility. And that amped up the tension measurably. So, how do you create safety for the people that would be signing the check for you to come in?
I'm just looking at Brett to make sure he wasn't
I
about
know
to
he
open
was
his
making
mouth.
a face.
Yeah.
Brett, if you're
Because
listening to
I
this,
hear
Brett
like
just made poopy face.
I just hear background noise, so I'm like, what's going on? I'm
I,
sorry, I just got distracted.
I, so one, I feel like I've been in both situations where the project sponsor or the manager, the leader, as you say, is kind of made aware that, hey, we're going to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that I mean, that just never goes well. Unless I'd say there's maybe a handful of situations where I think that could go well without them actually being a part of it.
Okay, so they have to be part of the change as well. And this, I
Sure.
mean, this
And
would
like
apply
at
for
some
any kind of
level,
organizational change. Yeah.
I would say the more damaged the collaboration is, uh, and there's other words you could probably use for that, but the more
Trauma
negative
is in the
tension or
system.
friction,
Yeah.
the more that leader needs to be in the trenches figuring out how to co-create a new path forward.
And
Right. I mean,
co-create, not tell
ideally
them.
you have, I mean, look at like a RACI chart, right? You've got, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. There's other things like DACY or whatever you want to call it. But the whole point is that you take a look at a stakeholder map. Who's got something? Who's got some kind of change in the game? And look at that and say, should your level of interaction in this work be?
Okay.
And I think that's again the severity of that negative friction of tension should mean that there's an awful lot of R's and A's, very few I's,
Okay.
right? At least in the beginning, and so that because especially trying to turn things around, that is always going to take more effort in the beginning.
Okay.
But the more that people invest in that reinvention in the beginning, again, there's no having to go get buy-in.
Right.
The more that we can reduce the number of people that have to quote get buy-in, the better for everybody.
Okay. So let's talk about team angle a little bit, because if people are dealing with this kind of situation or think they might be, team angle is a way for them to understand what's actually going on, and I'm assuming provide them with a course of action to take, right? I
Yeah.
hope.
So
Now that I threw that
I
out there.
think people could come into team angle in a number of ways. I think what we've found more than anything in testing the diagnostic is that a lot of leaders don't think that there are any problems within their team, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might boil it down to an individual, they might boil it down to a project. They might not be looking deeply at how the team is functioning.
Okay.
So what we found is, hey, it might be a little bit of a tough sell for those leaders who are just oblivious to what's going on, right? But then there, of course, are teams where it's like, yeah, we're dysfunctional. Like things
They
just
know
aren't
it's like
working,
super obvious.
right? And a lot of times consultants will do this thing where they come in, and I've done this as a PM consultant, like come in, do some interviews, review all of your background information, and then make some recommendations.
And pick a
What
villain
we're doing,
usually, right?
say that again?
And
Yeah.
pick a villain to unite everyone
Yep.
against.
Your fault.
Kind of, right.
Well,
So
it
in my
could be an
case, it's like, well,
organizational
there's a problem with
constraint,
project management, right? And
or
then I come in and I tell them, well, maybe it's not just project management.
yeah,
Let's look a little bit wider. But with Team Angle, what we're saying is, let's ask your team some of these very fundamental questions about the way that teams should behave
okay,
and whether or not they agree that you're doing these things, right?
okay,
Under the kind of like main category areas of communication. So we're looking
okay,
at communication practices. We're looking at collaboration and collaboration practices. And we're also looking at culture and how people are experiencing that culture.
okay,
And then what comes back in our diagnostic, it's a survey, it's a team survey.
okay,
We can come back and tell a team or a leader, this is where you're misaligned. And these are the conversations that you need to have.
okay,
And because you're misaligned in this way, these are signs that you might be experiencing, and these are things that you might be able to do. Super high level, right?
okay.
But we can then also, we developed a team angle conversation deck, which is
About
this
to be
card
held up,
deck.
and there you go.
This
Available
card
today.
deck.
Yeah.
Shipping
Yeah.
now.
So essentially, this card deck is tied to the topics in that diagnostic. We've got color-coded cards for communication, collaboration, and culture.
Okay, but there were four
And
colors there, right?
Yeah.
there are, yes, because we have essentially the way that this is a framework for having a conversation with teams and
Okay,
doing it in an interactive way. So you pull a card, you ask the question, and here's an example. Does our team have a shared language? Do we understand one another?
okay,
They're all designed as yes and no answers, right? So uh, every person responds, and then we have these blue cards where you can dig in deeper
okay,
to go further on the conversation, to not leave it at a yes or no. And
okay,
so in testing this, the feedback that we heard was, wow, you gave me a framework to have these conversations about topics I would never think to have with my team.
okay. So
So
go ahead.
yeah, go
But
ahead.
to add to what Brett was saying, in our experience, and even in some of our product research, our research validated kind of what we knew from our own experience and observation, which is leaders get promoted. They're not trained.
Right.
They're not, brought aside to say, here's how to have a meaningful conversation on one-on-one or with your team. Right. And so a lot of those one-on-one conversations or even team conversations is typically about how's the work, which kind of goes back to what you're saying, Dave, right? It's not like people aren't bad, they're not evil. They don't, there's not a lot of experience in how to actually facilitate a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And everything we want to do at Same Team, especially with Team Angle, one of the things that sets our framework, our platform apart is that everything leads to action. And what I mean by that is, like what Brett was saying, you don't just leave it as yes or no. You get into a question of why or how or what.
Okay.
right? So that the intent is, let's take the conversation on one step further at least, so that we can dig into how can we change this for the better? What can we do?
Okay. Now, who comes up with that solution? Is it the teams? Is it you guys? Is it the company that you're working for?
It's a combination. I mean,
Okay.
we've designed it so that we can provide some kind of best practices within the diagnostic. We've also developed workshops to essentially work with a team and create their communication playbook through the
Okay.
workshop, right? But people could also just purchase the card deck and have these meaningful conversations in one-on-one meetings or within team meetings
Okay.
and find solutions on their own.
Okay. But you
Multiple entry points to team angle for sure.
and for it to work though, you're going to have engagement at all levels, like managers down to the people doing the actual work. Everybody's got to
Yes.
walk into this knowing that it's going to require something of them and that they're
Mhm.
going to have to make choices and then run experiments to see what makes things better, right?
Yeah, I think depending on what the scenario is, right?
Yeah.
Like what the outcome is, but yes.
Okay.
And that's empowering in my opinion. And to the earlier point, it's inclusive of a team. So you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing a team into the conversation. An example, we ran this exercise with a team, and the question was about like, are we aware of our company's values and principles? And
Sure.
we very quickly found out that people knew, yeah, we have them, but we have no idea
Yeah.
what they are.
Well, even down
So
to the
that was
product
like a
level, like
quick
a
finding.
product vision,
Yeah.
if you don't know that, you're just as screwed, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. We use a lot of words to describe, kind of what's meta. Yes, we have values. We have 3 values, and that's all anybody remembers, right? Or just like,
Well, the
here's the
values are
product
like be
vision.
excellent, act with integrity, and deliver on time, on budget, and scope every
Right.
single thing.
Yeah. What was
Yeah.
interesting about this group that Brett mentioned is that company in particular had just 3,
Okay.
right? Just 3. Because, sometimes, like when I worked at that bank, we had 8 pillars or something like that, right? And but anyway, even with just the small company, it just had 3 values. Nobody could cite them, right? Not
Okay.
even one. So, uh,
Which means they're not aligned around the most important things that are supposed
Well,
to set the tone for how they do business.
because
yeah,
it's not
Right.
actually the value that the company operates under; it's the one that somebody decided was. But in play, there's
Yes.
a completely different value system.
Hmm.
yeah, we
So
had,
so that exercise triggered a new exercise where we helped them to redefine those values and principles, rewrite them, and then roll them out with the team.
Okay.
yeah, and because as much as possible, um, and this again comes from our experience, uh, groups will come together and they'll do meaningful work and they'll have the best intentions and they'll come up with, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
And then they leave the workshop or they leave the whatever co-creation time. And then they'll come back to it next week and they come back to it next week. And it's like, hey, what did we decide again?
Yeah.
Like all these great outcomes. And you're trying to just, bring it back together through fragments of memory.
Yeah.
And so everything that we do, even down to our playbooks, is like there has to be like, no, before you leave, before you stop,
Right.
let's take some action, right? Let's
Okay.
let's do something so that we've got this documented, which is also another fundamental practice of good communication,
Okay.
right? Let's make sure we've documented this. People know what they're on the hook for and when it's due, and go to the next step.
And what to do if they're not going to be able to get it done? I'm assuming. Like to me, a lot of what
Yeah,
you guys are
or what
talking,
happens if you don't.
yeah, a lot of what you guys are talking about, to me, it sounds like there has to be an understanding at the team level of what this thing does at a company level, or what these
Mhm.
practices do at a company level, because it's all just systems thinking, right? You're just putting all these things
Yeah.
together, watching the
Yes.
work get produced. Um, how important is visualizing? You talked about creating like a map of how the work happens. How big of a deal is that?
I mean, I think we typically work with more creative and technical teams, and I think
They know how to
it's
make mind
highly
maps.
important. I think it's highly important to have visual representation of the way that you work.
Okay.
Just in terms of gaining understanding, alignment, buy-in, adoption, however you want to put it. I
Yeah.
think it's just one of the ways you have to talk about the way you work. It has to be visualized.
Okay. And that,
And everyone's doing that now with the advent of tools like FigJam and Miro. I mean, it's like everyone's, maybe not everyone, a lot of companies are doing that.
I find a lot of companies use those tools, but they don't use it. So there's like working in the system and working on the system. In the system being we're producing the thing, on the
Mm-hmm.
system being more what you guys are talking about, which is let's understand what's happening and figure out what adjustments we have to make so it can happen better.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
a separate activity from let's produce the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's also knowing like when we produce the thing, we have to test the thing and then go back to the thing and revise it to make it align with reality.
Okay.
Yep.
Because we often will, I mean, just we as people, not just me and Greg, but we'll design things with the best intention and
Yeah.
then get into the real scenario
It
and the
doesn't work.
reality of the situation happens. And then we recognize, oh, we can't do it that way. Right. So
Okay.
it's this idea of continually evolving and adapting and improving.
So you're running experiments to see if we pull this lever, what does it do to us?
Oh yeah, like even the
Sure.
cards. Um, I had a pretty good idea. We had a good idea that they were going to work out well.
Okay.
But we made 10 decks. We sent them to people, put them out in the wild, and not just creative people too. Like one of the very first groups to use them was a group of engineers who had never met each other.
Wow.
um, and they were going through a rough time. There was just a lot of work on their shoulders, a lot of misunderstanding with the rest of the company on what to expect from that group, and kind of without any introduction to how to use them, they used the deck to get through a lot of team grief, and
Okay.
had very productive conversations about how the team could pull together and make their world better, right?
Okay.
But we learned that we used to have little mechanics of, Brett mentioned the yes no questions. We used to have a maybe question that we suggested people use, and that just it didn't work. It just kept kicking the can down the road.
Maybe as a response just was too ambiguous.
Okay.
So
They
Yeah,
weren't willing
yeah,
to
left it at
commit
yes
to
or
an answer.
no. Yeah.
yeah,
And then when you're facilitating a conversation, it's kind of like, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. The
Um,
diagnostic we've been through. I think Brett and I we're gonna take another third turn at some of the mechanics of the diagnostic,
Okay.
because we're essentially getting sentiment on a number of questions, and then turning that into data, that we can kind of enumerate how people what their opinion is about something. And so that's all to say, like this whole do something, test it, make it different, improve it, test it.
Inspect and adapt.
Yep, yep,
yes,
Okay.
yep.
absolutely. It's
But I
absolutely
do
what it is.
one thing. I do want to circle back to the question you asked about the visualization. Is
Yeah.
visualization important? At IBM, we had a saying that it will always stick with me, which is show me, don't tell me.
Okay.
Right. And in my experience, when you've got people who can see the world, and everybody sees it the same way,
The same
right?
world at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, like Brett mentioned, tools like whiteboarding tools like FigJam. I can't imagine trying to work without those tools today. And even if I was in project management, in agile, whatever, having that ability for us to have a look, the same look
Yeah.
at whatever's in front of us is super important. It
Okay.
doesn't, the more you can leave, how to put this, the more that people don't have to make their own interpretations of what a thing is,
So
the better aligned you're going to be.
is it really just that what you guys are talking about? I mean, part of it's common sense, but part of it's really just getting them to talk to one another, to understand one another.
Yeah, it's providing the basis for what you should be talking about, because you
Okay.
probably aren't. And it's providing more specific areas of things to talk about that you probably aren't talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, as a leader, you might think everything's going great. In fact, the example about the values and the principles, like,
Mm-hmm.
that leader never thought that would be something that nobody knew anything about. So we
Okay.
uncovered a really big thing that was found fundamental to his business and the way people operate. So it's like, again, these very little things, or seemingly little things,
Yeah.
can actually create really big waves
Of
within your
change.
team.
Yep.
And we can help you smooth them out with some simple tools
Okay.
and simple conversations. I also want to mention too that, along with the cards and the whole idea of even just having these conversations, we've put together a lot of resources around how to have these conversations, not just using the framework of the cards, but creating safe spaces, being inclusive. Like, there's a lot that comes along with that
Yeah.
that I think a lot of leaders are not necessarily fluent in, or trained in. So we're trying to help in that way as well.
I want to see how you both react to this. I would say that a lot of leaders don't even they don't understand what a safe space looks like. They don't know how to create it. There's one guy I worked with who actually on a call was like, "Look, it's a safe space. I need some feedback." And as soon as one person opened their mouth and they got eviscerated. But
Yeah.
Oh,
in that particular leader, there was a complete lack of self-awareness. So you guys walk into a situation, you can smell what's wrong. You get some of that, you glean some of that from conversations with the teams. And I'm thinking of it as a team. If I was a team member listening to this, thinking about my leader, how would you have that conversation with, like, would it be the team that has the conversation with the leader, or would you guys sit the leader down and be like, look, I know you think there's nothing wrong, but dude, it's effed up all over the place. These people are
well, we wouldn't know, right? So we can't
okay.
really do that. But our marketing is really trying to reach the leader in an empathetic way, because we've been in their situation, so we know
Okay.
what lack of resources, lack of time,
When you say
Lack of training.
resources, you mean
lack of
people,
training.
right?
Yeah, people, also funding.
Yeah.
Like,
All the
there's
things that
a
cause
lot.
that stress that you were talking about.
Right. So in many ways, yeah, I do think that it can come from the team, but really at the end of the day, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
You know, I've had clients come to me and say, well, if you're going to do this whole kind of diagnostic, or assessment of my team, what if you don't find anything? And that's just laughable to
Yeah.
me, because
What if we're
honestly, if you
perfect?
don't come from a place where you think you can always be better, then what the hell are you doing to begin with?
Okay, but that goes back to what you guys were saying earlier about Happy Cog, in that there are places where people work. I've worked at places like this where the people that are there, they're top performers. I mean, and you know that the person next to you is not going to drop the ball, and if they do, there's somebody there to catch it because
Right.
they're that freaking good. And there's other
Right.
places where it's just, and I think this is very prevalent right now. There is just this tacit acceptance of, yeah, this is unhealthy and it sucks, but eh, we're
Right.
tired.
I
We're
can put
tired from
half a
the
heart into it
pandemic.
and get
We're
through it.
tired of
Yeah.
the political stuff. We're tired of all the other stuff. And I just have a job and it's awful, but I'm just going to do it because, whatever.
But I'll respond to that by saying, sure, everyone feels that
Bless your
way. I
heart.
get that. Like, I absolutely get that.
Yeah.
But when you get to participate in a conversation and you become a part of the solution rather than feeling like it's always a problem for you,
Yeah.
you become more motivated to work on that thing, to resolve that thing, and
Okay.
to be a bigger part of the solution. And I've seen that. I'm seeing that right now with a team that I'm working with. It's, I had to push you so hard to get this documentation done. And then when you did it, you felt so good about yourself
Yeah.
that you want to tell everyone about it, right? Like, that's the human condition. It's how we are.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I do think
yeah.
that's a part of this. It's that inclusivity, the idea of, like, we're forcing you to talk about the way you work together so you can get better together.
I think there's
Yeah,
let me just, I'm not gonna, my
yeah,
head's gonna explode if I don't say this. Um, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but coming out of like everything that happened in the early 1900s with Frederick Taylor, they would figure out how you were supposed to work, and it
Mm,
was prescribed. And
right.
because of the way that, because of the stuff that we do, that it's never been done before, that everything's constantly changing, there's a need to lean on people and get them to kind of rise up and come up with answers. But the system is set up against that in many
Mm-hmm.
organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Especially now
it,
when we're talking about, let's talk about this for a second.
yeah,
The state of tech and teams being completely gutted. We're
yes,
removing roles and team members, but they're still expected to deliver at the
it's
same
Animal
rate or
Farm.
pace and
Yeah.
quality. So how do you do that? Like that's just not possible unless you have some kind of reset. And so what we're doing with Team Angle is presenting you the platform to have conversations, to have that reset
Hmm.
before you just go and slap together a new process,
Okay.
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, talk about the things that are really impacting the way that work is carried out
Yeah.
before you say, well, first we do this, then we do that. Like, that just
Well, but
having a
even
process map doesn't solve your problem.
Yeah.
we talk about the team angle diagnostic as a way to kind of find the problems. It also shows where things are going well,
Yes.
right?
Oh.
And so,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, we in fact in our report we'll say, here's your top 10. Like, you guys are acing
Okay.
this. This is where you're
This is where
aligned.
you're aligned.
High five, right? Like, don't go there. You don't need to. Here's your lower 10. You
Okay.
know, and so
Where to
these are
put
the
your
things where,
energy?
and again, it's not necessarily here's where you're doing it wrong. It's more of here's where your sentiment is misaligned in our experience.
Okay.
That points to there are some problems, right? Let's find the butterflies before it turns into the butterfly effect.
Okay.
And right. And so, and then to Brett's point, that then gives you the data, the information to have the conversations to go. Not everything's going to be fixed, and you mentioned, like, things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
Teams are more important now than ever, strong teams, because they have to have the agency, the wherewithal to get the trust, the autonomy,
Hmm.
so that they're there making changes as they need, so they can perform, they can get work out,
Yeah.
despite the challenges. You're only going to know what's going on there at the team level, not the company level. Anybody tells you different,
Right.
um, I would suggest that they've got a lot of learning and growing up to do, right? And so that's why we're trying to find and help teams at that level, not companies, at the
Hmm.
team level.
Oh, so that's an important aspect of this too, is that you're focusing at a team level and not like if it was an agile transformation, they would come in and try to change the whole company. You are
Right.
focused on localization.
It's try to, instead of changing it top down,
Hmm.
right? Or even like someone said, bottom up individuals. It's like, no, go find teams that are, have those fundamentals down. They're communicating, they're collaborating, they got a healthy culture. Go find those teams and work with them to figure out your transformation play. And then
Okay.
from there, figure out what it is that we need to do to teach, to train, to mentor, to guide, to coach, to then, get the other teams to transform. You do that, team by team, you're gonna, again, it's less buy-in. There's no,
Hmm.
all the top-down transformation is, you're gonna like this, I guarantee it, right? There's gonna be some consultants from McKinsey or the Deloitte or something, telling you how great all this is gonna be, and here's your high-level PowerPoint presentation. Go take this back to your division, and then it's left to, more
Make it happen.
interpretation on how
Yeah.
how you're gonna change that at the team level.
Yeah. I think there's one thing, I know we have to wrap up in a second, that you guys offer that is very unique with the cards and with the product and with everything that you're doing. and the podcast. Hope.
Yeah.
Just kind
Hope,
of
yes.
kind of in short supply right now.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, there's so much that we can't change.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who comes in selling whatever transformation play. There's only so much we could change. But the one thing that teams can do is they can have each other's back. They can create that culture of just even awareness of, hey, shit's going to come in. It rolls downhill. We're going to catch it. But we can work together and choose, create how we're going to catch it, what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do that as a team, through empathy, through our human-centered lens, so that when we're all in the suck, and we've all been there, we're at least doing it our way.
Okay. This is great. So what if I'm on a team, I want to learn more about this. I want to check out the cards. I want to learn about the diagnostic. What's the best way for them to reach you guys?
They should go to sameteampartners.com.
Okay.
All one word. There's tons of information there about Team Angle. I also want to mention we have a blog that's called Same Page. We're actively writing a book about Team Angle. We're publishing 2 articles a week about Team Angle, and then we're publishing a third kind of editorial article every week, and we're podcasting weekly. So
you guys are like a content machine. I feel like I create a lot of content. You guys lap me every single week. So
we
all about scheduling.
We also have a playbook on the Team Angle that has a practice Team Angle worksheet.
Oh, yes. Cool.
So you can get a sense of kind of our philosophy, everything we just talked about here. And that Team Angle worksheet will give you an idea of kind of the questions that we ask, and kind of an idea of how we turn that into data to inform if there's something worth investigating, right? We also have another playbook coming out. I believe it's going to be later this month, all about one-on-ones. And it's kind of the missing manual for leaders on how to conduct meaningful one-on-one conversations. Okay. It's the best thing a leader... well, it's the best way for a leader. You mentioned hope.
Yeah.
Engagement is down. Where engagement is down to like 1992 levels, which is bad. It's bad, and a lot of that has to do with people just not knowing how to talk to one another. The one-on-one playbook gives you all of that foundational education and learning development. The outcome of which Gallup did a poll that showed that leaders who conduct regular one-on-one sessions, their teams are 3 times more engaged than teams that do not do this. Okay. 3x.
That's awesome.
And it's simple and it's cheap. Doesn't cost any money. No conferences. No nothing.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. This was awesome.
Thanks for having us on.
Maybe what we can do, if we can make like a link tree or something, I can put a QR code up on the screen that will have been here the whole time they watch this interview.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
All the different things that you guys offer, and then they can get right to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Cool. All right. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks everybody for watching or listening, and go check out Same Team Partners.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Thank you.